we've all done it. You're typing up an email or something, and you accidentally delete a crucial paragraph, and your hand just naturally reaches out and hits Control-Z.
Right, you hit the undo button.
Exactly, the undo button. It's like a universal safety net.
Yeah.
A completely instant, free way to just erase a mistake like it never even happened.
Doesn't cost a single cent. You just wind back the clock and pretend the error never occurred.
Yeah, and honestly, that comfort, that idea of a free undo button, seems to be the exact mindset a lot of people are applying to the housing market right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if your house isn't getting the massive price you wanted, you just pull the listing. You hit the real estate undo button, you take the house off the market, and you tell yourself, well, I'll just try again next spring.
Which is such a common trap.
It really is. But what we're going to prove in this deep dive is that pulling a house off the market is, it's not a free pause. It actually starts this hidden, incredibly expensive meter running.
Yeah, people treat withdrawal as a neutral action. But the reality is it's an active financial decision, one that ends up freezing hundreds of thousands of dollars of your personal wealth.
To prove this for you today, we are digging into a really fascinating stack of market intelligence. We have highly specific data from the Sear team, that is Vincent and Jane Sear, out of Real of Pennsylvania.
Right, and they have serious experience. They've managed nearly 400 transactions since 2009.
Exactly. And they've mapped out seller behavior for the first half of 2026 across the Philadelphia suburbs. So we're talking Chester, Delaware, Montgomery in PA, and Newcastle County in Delaware.
And we are also layering that hyper-local behavior with some national macroeconomic data from Redfin from late 2025.
Right. So our mission for you today is to really unpack the hidden psychology and honestly, the hard math behind why sellers are just walking away from massive gains and why hitting that undo button is a costly illusion.
What stands out immediately in this data is that it strips away the emotion. I mean, real estate is intensely personal. It's where you live. It's where you raised your kids.
Oh, totally. It's your whole life.
Right. But when you look at the raw mechanics of how people are behaving when they list their homes, you start to see a profound disconnect between what sellers think they are protecting and the brutal reality of the math.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sheer volume of people hitting this imaginary undo button is staggering. In just the first half of 2026, across those 4 counties the Sear team serves, 2,378 homes were pulled off the market without selling.
That is a lot of homes.
It is. Think about what that entails. These are people who went through the massive hassle of decluttering, staging their living rooms, dealing with the whole, circus of keeping the house perfectly clean for strangers, and then they just quit.
It's a massive number of aborted transactions in a relatively short window and in a very specific geographic area. But, the sheer volume isn't even the most revealing part. No, it's the speed at which they are giving up.
Yeah. The numbers on that speed are wild. Because 54% of those sellers, that's 1,283 people, never cut their price at all before pulling out.
Not even once.
Over half of them just walked away without even testing the waters of a single price reduction. And it gets even more extreme. 31% of them quit in under 30 days without a single price cut.
To put that 30-day window in perspective for you, the median home in this data set sat for only 49 days before the seller pulled the plug.
49 days, that's nothing.
It really is nothing. In the real estate industry, agents generally don't even start calling a listing stale until it hits the 60-day mark. So these homes aren't languishing for months on end. Sellers are basically bailing out before the ink on the listing agreement is even dry.
Wow. And even when they did decide to cut the price, the median cut was just 5.4%, which is essentially a token amount.
Yeah, it's not a real repricing strategy to meet the market at that point. It's a rounding error.
Exactly. And we aren't just talking about multi-million-dollar luxury estates with tennis courts that, naturally take a year to find a buyer. The median asking price for these withdrawn homes was $419,000.
Right, which means this behavior is happening in the absolute heart of the market. These are everyday people. They're upsizing for a new baby or downsizing for retirement.
Yeah, the Sear team data provided some specific examples that really bring this zero patience behavior to life. Imagine a beautiful $585,900 colonial in Kennett Square. It hits the market, and after just 12 days, not even 2 full weeks, the seller pulls it.
12 days.
Just 12 days. Or a $749,900 townhome in Exton, withdrawn after 17 days. A $529,000 townhome in Downingtown, gone after 19 days.
It's incredible.
I look at this behavior, And it feels like sitting down at a high-stakes poker table, getting dealt one slightly mediocre hand, and immediately storming out of the casino before you even try to play it. I mean, are these sellers just being completely irrational, or is there something else driving this incredibly fast trigger finger?
Well, calling it irrational kind of misses the underlying mechanism. The first thing to understand is that this is not a localized fluke.
Okay, so it's happening everywhere.
Exactly. The SEER team found this exact behavior is incredibly consistent across all 4 counties, with a 50 to 56% no-cut rate in each one.
Wow, so it really is consistent.
It is. This is systemic behavior, which tells us we aren't dealing with individual panic. We are dealing with a widespread psychological phenomenon.
So if it's a psychological phenomenon, what is the trigger? Where is this systemic impatience actually coming from?
To understand the why, we really have to look at who is actually pulling these listings. And this is where the national Redfin data from late 2025 provides the missing puzzle piece.
Okay, what did Redfin find?
They found that 47% of delisted homes nationally are owned by people who bought within the last 5 years.
So we are talking about the pandemic buyers.
We are. This specific cohort of sellers is heavily, heavily influenced by the 2020 to 2022 frenzy. You have to remember what that market looked like.
It was wild.
It was a complete anomaly. These people bought, or at least they watched their neighbors sell, in a market where a house would get 10 offers, all vastly over the asking price, with buyers waiving every single inspection entirely within a single weekend.
Yeah, it was absolute chaos. Buyers were basically throwing blank checks at sellers just to win the bid.
Right. And what happens when you experience that kind of extreme market dynamic is a psychological concept known as anchoring.
Anchoring.
Yes. In behavioral economics, anchoring is the human tendency to latch onto a specific reference point, an anchor, and judge everything else against it. For these sellers, their anchor isn't just a high price. Their anchor is the unprecedented velocity of that 2021 market.
I see. So when they list their house in 2026 and they don't have 5 aggressive offers by Sunday night, cognitive dissonance kicks in. They feel like something is horribly wrong.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that it's not that they are inherently greedy, it's that they are pricing their homes and calibrating their expectations to a vividly remembered market rather than the current one.
They're stuck in the past.
To them, anything less than an instant bidding war feels like the market is fundamentally broken, rather than realizing their own expectations might be out of alignment. Add to that the fact that many of these sellers hold those ultra-low pandemic mortgage rates.
Oh, right, like 3% or lower.
Exactly.
Because giving up a 3% rate to move to a new house with a much higher rate is painful. The new house has to be the perfect dream home, or the profit on the old house has to be massive to justify the leap.
Yep. That low rate artificially raises the emotional bar for what makes moving worth it. They have an anchored expectation of price and a high threshold for moving. When the market doesn't instantly deliver that flawless scenario within 12 days, their first instinct is to pull the ripcord.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second here. If I'm a listener sitting on a house right now and I'm anchored to those wild 2021 prices and I don't absolutely have to move today, doesn't it make logical sense to just pull the listing, wait until next spring, and let the market bounce back to give me my number?
On the surface, sure. If you mistakenly view pulling the listing as a free undo button, that logic seems somewhat sound, but this is where the illusion completely falls apart.
How so?
Well, when we dive into the actual arithmetic of what these sellers are doing, we uncover a massive disconnect between what they think they are protecting and what they are actually risking.
Okay, let's get into the hard numbers.
Let's start with what these sellers have already won. The median school district in this Philadelphia suburban region has appreciated by a massive 50.8% since 2020.
Wait, 50.8%. So
Yeah.
if they bought a house for $400,000 just a few years ago, it's now worth over $600,000.
Yes, exactly. They are sitting on roughly half again what they paid. These are not distressed sellers staring down a financial loss. They are sitting on a staggering gain.
That's a huge cushion.
It is. Now, let's look at the market they are actually fleeing. The SEER team analyzed 71,542 settled sales in this region across 2025 and 2026.
That is an incredibly robust sample size.
It is. And out of those 71,000 plus sales, 54% sold at or above the asking price. 82% sold within 10% of the asking price, and only 25% sold more than 5% below asking.
So the market isn't broken or crashing at all. Homes are selling, and they're selling very close to what people are asking for them.
Exactly. The vital framing here is that the market these delisters are walking away from generally transacts within about 5% of the asking price. If you stay in the market and negotiate, the data proves you are highly likely to settle within 5% of your dream number.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If the typical gap between what they want and what the market is offering is only about 5%, and their total appreciation since 2020 is over 50%, they are pulling their homes off the market to avoid a tiny 5% gap while sitting on a 51% gain.
Yes.
It's like holding a winning lottery ticket, walking up to the counter to cash it in, finding out the state is going to take a 5% administrative fee, and instead of taking your massive pile of cash, you get offended and refuse to cash the ticket at all.
That is a perfect analogy.
You just show it back in a drawer and hope the tax laws magically change next year.
They are halting a near certain, highly profitable outcome to avoid what essentially amounts to a rounding error against the massive equity they've already gained.
But let's look closer at that drawer where they shoved the lottery ticket. Even if it is just a 5% gap, let's say that's $25,000 on a $500,000 house. 25 grand is real money. If taking the house off the market is truly free, why not just wait? What is the actual tangible harm in trying again in the spring?
Because shoved in that drawer, the ticket is secretly costing you money every single day.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. This brings us to the core argument of the SIR team's data withdrawal is unequivocally not a neutral free pause button. There is a hidden meter running, and it consists of 3 true mathematically provable costs of waiting.
Okay, let's break down this hidden meter. What's the first thing they are actually paying for?
The first is the carrying cost. Every single month, your home is off the market, you are writing checks, you are paying property taxes, you are paying hazard insurance,
Right.
you are paying mortgage interest, and you are paying for maintenance and upkeep. And remember, you are paying this on a house that you have already mentally decided you want to leave.
Let's put some real math to that. Say you have a $500,000 house. Between property taxes, insurance, and the interest portion of your mortgage, you could easily be burning $2,000 to $2,500 a month just to maintain the status quo.
Easily.
If you pull your house off the market and wait 6 months for the elusive spring market, you just torched $15,000 in carrying costs. And what were you trying to save by pulling it? A 5% gap, which is $25,000.
Exactly.
You are actively bleeding $15,000 just for the sheer hope of maybe saving $25,000 later. The math is completely upside down.
The carrying cost alone often destroys whatever price premium you hope to gain by waiting. But that is only the beginning. The second cost is arguably much larger, and that is delayed liquidity.
Okay, let me think about this. So I'm bleeding cash every month to pay the taxes and the insurance. But at least the actual profit I made on the house, my equity, is still sitting there safely, right? And I haven't lost the actual value of the home.
It's sitting there, yes, but safely is the wrong word because it is completely paralyzed. The equity in these homes, which, given the 50% appreciation, is frequently between $200,000 and $400,000, stays frozen in the drywall of the house.
Frozen in the drywall. I love that visual because it's not just a number on a Zillow screen. It is actual capital that you cannot deploy.
Right. Think about the opportunity cost of that frozen capital. If you cash out, that $300,000 could be deployed into your next home, allowing you to put down a massive down payment and significantly lower your new mortgage burden at today at higher rates.
Which is huge right now.
Absolutely. Or it could be moved into investment accounts to generate yield. Even a basic 5% yield on $300,000 is $15,000 a year in passive income you are just giving up.
Oh, wow.
It could be used to start a business or pay down high-interest credit card debt. By refusing to close over a tiny 5% negotiation gap, a seller is choosing to leave hundreds of thousands of dollars locked up indefinitely, earning absolutely nothing.
Wow. So I'm losing money on monthly expenses, and I'm losing the money my money could be making. But even considering all of that, if I wait until spring, surely the market will be hotter and make up for it. The spring market is always better. That's just real estate 101, isn't it?
Well, and that assumption brings us to the third massive cost market perception and macro trends. Assuming tomorrow will be better is a tremendous gamble right now.
Why is it a gamble?
First, there is the digital footprint. A home that comes off the market and goes back on later carries a history. Buyers see the days on market, the withdrawal, the relisting.
Oh, right.
It instantly raises suspicion. They wonder what was wrong with it or assume the seller is difficult to work with. But more importantly, if we look at the national Redfin data, delistings were up 28% year over year, driven by a market where supply is actually outrunning demand by roughly 500,000 more sellers than buyers.
500,000 more sellers than buyers nationally. So the structural odds are actually stacked against you. You are betting that the market will magically tilt in your favor when the data shows the inventory pressure is running the other way.
Exactly.
So if the macro odds are that bad, how do you avoid putting yourself in a position where you even want to hit the undo button in the first place?
You avoid it by having real predictive analytics before you list.
Okay.
The sellers who succeed are the ones who price for the market they are actually in, not the market they remember. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the Sear team's specific methodology comes into play. Vincent Sear built a system called WB3 predictive pricing, which operates at a 92.2% accuracy rate.
How does that actually work, though? How do you predict a price with 92% accuracy?
It works by abandoning the old model of just looking in the rearview mirror at settled comparable sales. WB3 uses algorithmic analysis to look at real-time neighborhood absorption rates, active buyer search criteria, and hyperlocal demand shifts.
So it's looking at what's happening right now, not 6 months ago.
Right. It calculates exactly what the market will bear today, pricing the home so accurately that it attracts immediate interest without needing to endure the agonizing 60 days of stagnation that lead to withdrawal.
That makes total sense.
Furthermore, the team pairs this tech with deep specialized training. Vincent holds the CLHMS designation.
Which is the Certified Luxury Home Marketing Specialist, right?
Correct. That matters because pricing high-end homes requires understanding very specific buyer nuances. You have to know how to maximize value without alienating the small pool of qualified buyers. He also holds the SRES, or Seniors Real Estate Specialist designation.
Why does a specific designation for seniors matter for pricing?
Because older sellers often have decades of deferred maintenance or very specific equity requirements for funding their retirement care.
Right. They can't just float expenses forever.
Exactly. They are particularly vulnerable to the trap of frozen equity. They literally cannot afford to pay high carrying costs on a fixed income while waiting for a magical price. And Jane Sear holds an RCSD certification, which stands for Real Estate Collaboration Specialist in Divorce.
Wow, that sounds incredibly high stakes.
It is. In a divorce, liquidating the marital asset fairly and quickly is often court mandated. Pulling a house off the market in that scenario isn't just a financial hit, it's a legal and emotional disaster.
Jeez, yeah.
The point of mentioning these specific credentials is to show that running precise hyperlocal data and understanding the human stakes behind the transaction is what separates the people who successfully sell their homes from the people who hit the undo button and bleed cash.
The overarching theme here is actually very empowering, I think. The data isn't saying that sellers who pull their listings are foolish. It's just that they are flying blind.
Exactly. They don't have the spreadsheets in front of them.
Right. When you are standing in your kitchen feeling insulted that someone offered you $20,000 less than you wanted, emotion takes over. But when the arithmetic is laid out clearly on the table, a roughly 5% gap versus the thousands in monthly carrying costs, plus the hundreds of thousands in frozen liquidity, plus the fact that you are betting against a market with more sellers than buyers, the rational choice becomes incredibly obvious.
It is a decision with a heavy, heavy price tag. The sellers who come out ahead are the ones who run that calculation before they list, ensuring they never need the undo button at all.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive because it takes something that feels entirely intuitive, waiting for a better price, and proves mathematically why it's a massive trap.
It really does.
So, to bring it directly back to you, the listener, the ultimate takeaway here is that withdrawal is not a neutral pause. If you are sitting on a massive 50% plus gain, and you have already made the life decision to move, the honest question you have to ask yourself isn't, will I get my perfect magical number if I just wait a little longer? The real question is, what am I paying right now in actual cash for carrying costs and opportunity cost on my frozen equity, just to chase a tiny gap that is smaller than the game I've already earned?
It requires measuring the invisible costs against the visible ones.
And that leaves us with a broader, slightly provocative thought for you to chew on today. Because human psychology doesn't just apply to real estate.
Oh, certainly not.
Think beyond the housing market for a second. Where else in your life are you doing this? In your career, in your investments, or even in your relationships? Where are you paying massive invisible carrying costs because you are anchored to an unrealistic past expectation?
That's a great question.
Are you leaving your personal capital, your joy, or your financial growth frozen in the drywall, just waiting for a perfect market that might never actually come? Keep questioning those assumptions, look for the hidden meters in your own life, and whatever you do, don't let your equity stay frozen. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.